Seen one strike. Now lawmakers have seen both. So why can't everyone agree on what really happened? Lines still blurred about blowing those alleged drug boats to bits, including 2 survivors.
It gives me no pleasure to say what I'm about to say because I worked with Pete Hegseth for 7 or 8 years at Fox News. This is an act of a war crime, ordering survivors who the law requires be rescued instead to be murdered. There's absolutely no legal basis for it. Everybody along the line who did it, from the Secretary of Defense to the Admiral to the people who actually pulled the trigger, should be prosecuted for a war crime for killing these 2 people.
More troubling news for Donald Trump regarding his narco boat strike campaign. It was sold as a bold, decisive, and tough plan on defeating those trafficking drugs, and it seems to have blown up in his administration's face.
Breaking news, waving their arms. Sources telling CNN the admiral who formally called for the second strike on the alleged drug boat in the Caribbean told lawmakers that the survivors were waving at something in the air before the second strike, although they say it is unclear whether they were surrendering or asking a U.S. aircraft for help. We are also learning that Admiral Bradley told lawmakers that the boat was going to meet a larger vessel heading to Suriname. Suriname's a small South American country east of Venezuela. And that may matter because U.S. drug enforcement officials tell us that drug trafficking routes via Suriname are primarily destined for European markets, not the United States. Of course, President Trump has explicitly said that this boat was an imminent threat heading to the United States, saying, quote, the strike occurred while the terrorists were heading to the United States.
First, this week's added scrutiny of what even fellow Republicans have alluded to as a possible war crime regarding a alleged double boat strike back in September.
There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield. No kidding. And I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. Mm-hmm. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
You know what? I agree with 2016 Pete Hegseth.
And now this, a Colombian family is accusing the United States of killing an innocent fisherman and has taken their case to an international human rights commission. Back in September of 2025, one of dozens of strikes carried out by the U.S. forces against alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean, Alejandro Carranza's vessel was bombed. The U.S. claims that the strike targeted a drug smuggling boat. Carranza's family, however, insists that he was just fishing with no ties to trafficking whatsoever. The complaint says that the strike amounted to an extrajudicial killing. And the family is accusing the US of violating international human rights norms, naming both senior US military leadership and, by extension, the administration itself.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro said one of those killed was a Colombian fisherman and was not involved in drug trafficking.
No hay necesidad de tirar misiles, es absolutamente ineficaz. Y no parece estar dirigida esa acción realmente a incautar cocaína, sino a una invasión, que también es absurdamente ilegal.
Trump used a Navy anniversary speech to announce yet another strike. 6 men killed in the Caribbean.
In recent weeks, the Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. You see that?
And just days after that, on October 16th, a strike left 2 survivors. They were quickly handed over to their home countries of Colombia and Ecuador, a move that prevented them from challenging their detention in court. Authorities in Ecuador later declined to file charges against their national, but Colombia said they would pursue a legal investigation on their individual.
And as I mentioned, this is just the latest in what has been a troublesome week for this administration regarding these very attacks.
If this was a legal action of war, which is still under dispute, then it would be a war crime. If it was not, it was a murder. In either case, again, the right way to find out if there are drugs aboard a boat is you stop the boat, you board it, you investigate it, and in the process you learn if there are drugs, you learn about the strategies involved, which gives you information to help dismantle a broader operation. Blowing a boat up, not even knowing much about what the boat is doing, simply destroys that type of information. So it's not only extrajudicial, it is also stupid. And so this is vast concerns about judgment. And by the way, of course, this is all a prelude to the possible strikes on Venezuela itself.
I mean, since the beginning of this maritime strike campaign, U.S. forces have reportedly killed over 80 people in 20 plus strikes, a count that includes several cases where survivors of an initial strike were allegedly killed in follow-up attacks, prompting accusation of double tap strikes, with lawmakers stating that the American people would be completely appalled by the video footage if they are to see it. And I mean, it's become that problematic that even our allies are withholding intelligence as a means to not indict themselves in any wrongdoing.
The United Kingdom is suspending, listen to this, suspending some of its intelligence sharing with the U.S. because of the Trump administration's strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean.
We are joined now by senior White House reporter Kevin Liptak and CNN national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand. Natasha, to you first with this exclusive reporting. I mean, this is a big deal. The UK is arguably the closest ally to the United States when it comes to intelligence sharing. What else do we know?
Yeah, Pam, it's a really significant rupture here. Essentially, what we're learning is that the UK is no longer sharing intelligence with the US about these suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean because it does not want to be complicit in the US military's strikes on these drug vessels and believes fundamentally that the US military's use of force against these vessels violates international law, according to multiple sources that we spoke to. Now, previously, the UK had been happy to help the United States locate and interdict vessels that were transiting the Caribbean that appeared to be trafficking drugs. But the key difference, of course, is that it was helping the Coast Guard intercept those vessels, arrest those on board, seize the drugs, and allowing these individuals to have some semblance of due process. But now the U.S., of course, has started striking these boats unilaterally with military force, killing everyone on board. The total now for number of people killed is around 76. And we're told that the UK is deeply uncomfortable with that, and they believe that it is pretty blatantly illegal.
And as I've said time and time again, and I've actually heard many Republicans echo this very point, the problem is with transparency. We are just expected to take this administration at their word, to take Pete Hegseth at his word, that these guys being bombed are basically bad guys and no details need to be provided. But then when a fisherman's family, rather than traffickers as they continue to allege, ends up appealing to a human rights body, then the narrative deserves to be questioned, no? Especially if innocent lives are being lost. I mean, by dragging the case before the Human Rights Commission, a respected regional rights body, Carranza's family then ensures that the story becomes global. Therefore, regional allies and international observers are now focused on how the United States, under Donald Trump, justifies lethal force in international waters, and whether or not they are continuing to cross a line into unlawful killing or war crime territory. And not to mention the domestic fallout has already caused a major rift between fellow Republicans, with many of them coming out and speaking against their fearless cult leader.
If they're armed, show us that they're armed. If they're not armed, explain to us why we kill people who are not armed. So we usually think of war, we think of those people are taking up arms and they may kill our soldiers, so we kill them first. That's war. But these people, we haven't been told if they have arms. 2 of them they killed in the water, but 2 of them they scooped up. And did they arrest them for drugs and get drugs that were floating around in the sea? Did they look for arms? No, they just released them and said, go back to your home country, which really wasn't Venezuela. It was Colombia and Ecuador. So I think this whole thing is a terrible situation, but we as a country should not be so easygoing as to say, well, an accusation is enough. We sometimes make mistakes, even in our country, even when we're very, very careful. The DNA Innocence Project found that there were people in jail in our country with full due process. Well, we made a mistake. They've been in jail for 20 years. Do we really think blowing up boats without any kind of process? We got records from the Coast Guard yesterday that we released of boats stopped off of Venezuela before we had this new policy. So we've had an interdiction policy for 100 years probably, where we interdict people on the open seas and the Coast Guard does it. The Coast Guard statistics say that of boats off Venezuela, 21% of those boats didn't have drugs.
And it's not a single isolated mistake, right? the maritime strike campaign has been widespread, with recent reports emerging that commanding officers were forced to step down after voicing their concern over the legality of these strikes. What we've been sold as basically a newly packaged war on drugs campaign is lacking any semblance of transparency. We have no details on those that are being attacked, no proof provided that they were in fact trafficking drugs. We're just expected to swallow the snake oil that Pete Hegseth is selling.
Hey Midas Mighty, it's Ben, Brett, and Jordy, and we just want to thank you for being the backbone of this movement.
This year tested us more than ever, but together we proved that pro-democracy voices don't just compete, we win.
We took on the entire MAGA machine, won a Webby for Podcast of the Year,
the MeidasTouch podcast,
and you were with us every step of the way.
And trust us, what we're working on next is bigger, bolder, and built for 2026. Let's keep this momentum going, spread the word, we are just getting started.
Shout out to the Midas Mighty!